The fluorescent lights inside First Meridian Bank were the same as always, steady, indifferent, the kind of light that makes everyone look slightly unwell. I had banked here for 22 years. The tellers knew my name. The branch manager, Frank Holloway, had attended my retirement dinner 7 years ago and given a toast that made my wife cry. I came in every Tuesday morning to review my accounts in person, an old habit I had never abandoned even after everything moved online. Old habits and old men are stubborn in the same way. I was crossing the lobby toward the service counter when Frank appeared from his office doorway. He looked different, not sick, not afraid exactly, but something had tightened around his eyes in a way I recognized from 31 years practicing corporate law. It was the look of a man who knows something and is calculating the cost of saying it out loud. He crossed the floor before I reached the counter. His hand landed on my forearm, firm and deliberate. "The way you stop someone from stepping into traffic, Mr. Webb." His voice was barely above a breath. "Don't sign anything today. Whatever they put in front of you, whatever reason they give, don't sign. Just stay quiet and watch." I looked at him. "Frank, what?" But he was already steering me toward the side corridor that led to the safe deposit room, a hallway that curved behind the main floor where the teller windows couldn't see. He positioned me at the corridor entrance, adjusted the angle slightly, then said nothing else, just pointed toward the lobby with a small, careful nod. My son walked through the front door 40 seconds later. Daniel was 39 years old, my only child, tall like I used to be before age compressed things. He was dressed well. Sport coat, no tie. The casual confidence of a man who believes the world generally arranges itself around his schedule. Beside him walked a man I didn't recognize, 50s, soft around the middle, carrying a leather portfolio. The stranger wore the expression of someone performing professionalism rather than living it. They went directly to the service desk. I was too far to hear words clearly, but I could read the transaction. Daniel spoke. The teller nodded, picked up a phone, spoke briefly to someone. A few minutes passed. A second employee appeared from the back and placed documents on the counter. The stranger in the sport coat opened his portfolio, produced papers of his own, laid them alongside the bank's forms. Daniel signed something. The stranger signed as witness. The teller reviewed each page with the careful slowness of someone following protocol they had been specifically reminded to follow. I watched my son move through those procedures with the ease of a man who had rehearsed them. His shoulders were relaxed. At one point he checked his phone, typed something, put it away. He wasn't nervous. He had no reason to be nervous. As far as he knew, I wasn't there. Frank appeared at my shoulder. His voice was still quiet, but steadier now. "That man with him is a notary, a private one, not affiliated with us. They've been here twice before in the past month. The first time they asked about procedures for transferring account authority. The second time they asked about what documentation a cognitive assessment would need to override an existing account holder's instructions." I kept my eyes on Daniel. "A cognitive assessment. Your son told our branch manager you've been showing signs of memory loss. He said the family was concerned. He asked what steps would need to be taken if you were eventually declared incompetent." Frank paused. "Our manager flagged it. That's when it came to me." The stranger was collecting his papers now, sliding them back into the portfolio. Daniel shook hands with the teller, unhurried, comfortable, the handshake of a man completing ordinary business. Then he turned and walked back toward the exit without looking in my direction. I stood in that side corridor for a long moment after the doors closed behind him. 31 years in corporate law had taught me to separate emotion from information. Grief, rage, the sick vertigo of betrayal, those were real, but they were useless without discipline. I had watched clients destroy strong cases by acting on feeling instead of evidence. I had watched guilty parties walk free because the wronged party moved too fast. I filed everything away. The notary, the documents, the visits I hadn't known about. My son's relaxed shoulders. "Who else knows about this?" I asked Frank. "Just me and the manager who flagged it. I haven't documented anything internally yet. I wanted to talk to you first." "Don't document it yet. Give me a few days." I met his eyes. "And Frank, thank you. I mean that." He nodded once. "Be careful, Martin." I drove home on the highway with the radio off, letting the silence work. The house sat at the end of a quiet street in North Dallas, a 4-bedroom colonial I had owned outright for 11 years. My wife Margaret had planted the roses along the front walk the spring before she passed. I had kept them alive out of stubbornness, and something I didn't have a better word for. Daniel and his wife Renee lived in the guest wing. They had moved in 18 months earlier, after the restaurant he had invested in collapsed, and took their savings with it. I had offered the arrangement without conditions. Family helps family. I had believed that. I had believed it right up until I watched my son sign documents in my bank while I stood hidden in a corridor. Their cars were both in the driveway. I sat in my car for a moment before going inside, breathing slowly, constructing the face I would need, slightly distracted, a little tired. Nothing alarming, nothing that would signal anything, had changed. The performance had to start now, and it had to be flawless. Renee was in the kitchen when I came through the door. She was precise and attractive in the way of someone who had worked hard to become both. Sharp features, dark hair, a manner that could seem warm from a distance. She looked up when I entered with the smile she reserved for me practiced, a half-degree too bright. "You were out early," she said. "Everything okay?" "Fine. Just the bank. Lost track of time a little, I think." I touched my temple lightly, let my eyes drift for a moment before focusing back on her. Her smile didn't change, but something behind it did. A small calibration. Interest, thinly disguised as concern. "You should eat something." I made coffee. "I think I'll lie down for a bit." I yawned. "I keep getting these headaches." Her expression softened into the particular look I had seen professionals use with elderly patients. Gentle, slightly elevated. "Not the way you look at an equal. You've been mentioning those a lot lately," she said. "Daniel, and I think you should see someone. A specialist, maybe. Just to rule things out." "Maybe," I said vaguely. I went to my study, closed the door softly, and sat at my desk for a very long time. The next morning, I drove to Harmon and Associates on the 3rd floor of a business in downtown Dallas. Glenn Harmon was 63, methodical, not particularly warm, which was exactly what I needed. He had done estate work for Margaret and me years ago. I had recommended him to colleagues for 2 decades. He was the kind of attorney who didn't ask unnecessary questions. I laid out what I knew. The bank visits, the notary, the cognitive assessment inquiries. Glenn listened without interrupting, made 3 pages of notes in his careful hand, and looked up when I finished. "You want to protect the estate before they make their move. I want to protect it before and document everything that happens after." He nodded. "I can revise the will today. The house transfers to the Dallas Lawyers Care Foundation. Upon your death, you're familiar with them? I served on their board for 6 years. Your son receives a fixed inheritance. What are you thinking?" I had thought about this through most of the previous night. 40,000. Enough to demonstrate I considered him. Not enough to make the scheme worth the consequences. Glenn wrote without visible reaction. "I'll also file a durable power of attorney naming me as your legal representative for financial matters. That creates a clear chain of authority that overrides any subsequent document they might try to file." He set down his pen. "If they've already submitted paperwork to any institution, the bank hasn't processed anything. I have confirmation of that." "Good. I'll contact First Meridian directly once the revised documents are filed. Standard communication about authorized representatives." He paused. "You understand that once this protection is in place, any attempt they make to circumvent it becomes a criminal act." "That's the point." I signed the new will at 4 that afternoon, 2 paralegals witnessing. Glenn filed it with the county recorder before close of business. Then I drove across town to a small office suite near Love Field, where a private investigator named Sandra Birch ran a 3-person operation. She came recommended by a colleague who had used her in a contentious divorce case. She was in her late 40s, gray coming in at her temples, the kind of direct eye contact that comes from years of watching people lie. I told her what I needed: employment history, financial records, any debt obligations, anything that was public record on Daniel Webb and Renee Webb. "What am I looking for specifically?" "Whatever is there." She quoted me a rate. I paid the retainer in cash, which she noted without comment. Standard turnaround is 10 days. Could be faster depending on what surfaces. On the drive home, I made one more stop. A big box electronics store where I purchased a small digital recorder, the kind that fits in a shirt pocket and runs for 16 hours on a single charge. I charged it overnight on my desk. The following 2 weeks moved at the strange double speed of patient waiting. I continued my performance at home. Small hesitations at the breakfast table. Losing my reading glasses when I had set them down deliberately. Asking what day it was once or twice a week. Renee responded to each incident with the careful attention of a person taking inventory. Daniel was more obvious about it. He would catch Renee's eye across the table with a look that he thought was subtle. It was not subtle. I had spent 3 decades reading juries. He raised it directly on a Thursday morning. We were having coffee, the 3 of us, and he leaned forward with his elbows on my table and spoke in the considerate tone I was learning to hate. "Dad, we've been talking. We think it might be worth getting a full medical evaluation, not because anything is wrong, just to have a baseline. Peace of mind. I feel fine," I said. "You've been forgetting things. Everyone forgets things at my age." Renee touched my hand. "It would just be a conversation with a doctor, someone who specializes in memory. We'd go with you." I let my hands wrap around my coffee mug a little tighter. "I'll think about it." They exchanged the look again. That evening I sat in my study with the recorder running on my desk, positioned near the air vent that backed against the guest suite. Daniel and Renee's voices came through intermittently, enough to catch the shape of the conversation. I heard my name. I heard the word assessment. I heard Renee say something that included the phrase memory care, and then Daniel's response, which I couldn't fully catch, but ended with the word soon. I let the recorder run until past midnight. Sandra Birch called 7 days after our meeting. "Your son has approximately $68,000 in outstanding debt, primarily 2 sources, a failed business loan that he personally guaranteed, and a private lending arrangement with an individual who I'd describe as operating in a gray area legally." She paused. "The second debt is $31,000, and the lender has been sending demand letters for 4 months. The language escalated in the most recent one. I kept my voice even. What else? Your daughter-in-law had a separate credit card account she opened 14 months ago. She's been running consistent charges through it, hotel bookings, restaurant purchases, items that don't match a household budget. I can email the documentation." "Do that. And Sandra, keep this open. I may need you again." "Of course." I printed the files when they arrived, organized them by date, and added them to the accordion folder I was keeping in my safe behind the bookcase. The safe was a combination unit I had changed the code on 3 weeks ago. I had told no one the new combination. The recorder gave me what I needed on a Tuesday night. I was lying still in my bedroom with my phone on the nightstand, the recorder on the dresser by the wall, when their voices came through clearly enough for the first time. The house had that specific late-night quiet where sounds carry differently. Renee was explaining something. Her voice had the flat, focused tone of someone reviewing a plan rather than inventing one. "The assessment is scheduled for the 14th. Dr. Calder has agreed to document moderate cognitive decline. He said the file will support the competency petition." "How much?" Daniel's voice. $5,000. "I told you already." A pause. "And after the petition goes through, the power of attorney takes effect immediately for financial matters. Bank accounts, investments, the house." A brief silence. "The house is listed at $640,000 by the comps I pulled. Even after fees, we're looking at over $580,000 clear." "What about his attorney?" "He has Glenn Harmon on file. We file through a different county jurisdiction. By the time Harmon is notified, the transactions are processing. That's how Dr. Calder's last case worked." Daniel's voice dropped lower, harder to distinguish. "Then, and once he's in a facility, these places are managed. His contact with the outside is limited. Anyone who tries to visit goes through administration." She said something else, quieter, that I had to play back twice to understand. "Old people in memory care pass away at expected rates, Daniel. No one investigates expected." I lay in the dark with that sentence resting on the ceiling above me. I had suspected fraud. I had prepared for fraud. But there is a particular coldness that comes from hearing your son's silence in response to those words. He didn't object. He didn't push back. He asked about the timeline. I lay still until I heard them go quiet. Then I saved the recording, encrypted the file, and sent copies to 3 separate locations. In the morning, I drove to Glenn Harmon's office without calling ahead. His assistant let me in when I explained it was urgent. Glenn listened to the recording without expression, made his notes, and set down his pen. This is sufficient for criminal conspiracy charges. The recording in Texas is admissible under one-party consent laws. He looked at me carefully. You understand the full implications here. Your son. I understand. I need to ask you directly. Do you want to pursue this through criminal channels, civil channels, or both? Both. And I want to report Dr. Calder to the State Medical Board in the same filing. Glenn was quiet for a moment. I'll contact the district attorney's office today. I'll also send formal notification to First Meridian and any other financial institution you have accounts with, alerting them that any power of attorney document submitted on your behalf requires direct verification through my office before processing. He paused. The petition they filed with the county, when is the scheduled date? The 14th. 5 days from now. I'll move today. I drove home through Dallas traffic with the strange stillness that settles over you when the preparation is finished and the execution has begun. Everything had been said that needed to be said. Everything had been filed that needed to be filed. Now it was only a matter of waiting for consequence to catch up to choice. They noticed the change that same afternoon. Renee came home first and went straight to the kitchen, moving quickly, the way people move when they're checking on something they expect to find. I heard her on the phone in the hallway, her voice low and controlled. 20 minutes later, Daniel came through the door, and they retreated to their wing without speaking to me. That evening, Daniel came to my study. He didn't knock. He stood in the doorway with his hands loose at his sides, looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen before on his face. Not contempt, not calculation, but something closer to evaluation, trying to decide what I was. Exactly. Did you contact your attorney today? I looked up from the legal journal I was reading. I speak with Glenn fairly often. They called me, he said. The bank. They told me there's a hold on any third-party authorization requests on your accounts, effective immediately. I closed the journal. That seems like a reasonable precaution. His jaw shifted. Did you hear something? Did someone say something to you? What would they have said? His eyes moved across my face, reading, looking for confusion, for the reliable incompetence he had been building a case around. He didn't find it. I watched him understand, gradually, what that meant. The color shifted slightly in his neck. You need to cancel whatever you've done, he said. There are things you don't understand about what we've been managing. Sit down, Daniel. He didn't sit. He stayed in the doorway, as if keeping the exit available. I know about the bank visits, I said. I know about the notary. I know about Dr. Calder and the $5,000 and the competency petition filed last week. I know about the $68,000 in debt and the lending arrangement that has been threatening you for 4 months. I paused. I know about the recording from Tuesday night. The silence in the room was complete. There's a lot more that I know, I continued. But those are the relevant details. His face did something complicated. Several things at once, shock collapsing into calculation, calculation collapsing into something that looked briefly like shame before that closed off too. Dad, don't. My voice stayed level. Don't. Start with Dad, and a reason. I have heard every variation of that sentence in 31 years of courtrooms. You don't understand the pressure. I understand the pressure perfectly. You owe money you can't repay. The restaurant failed and took everything with it, and the debt didn't go with it. You have been in this house for 18 months, and instead of rebuilding, you spent that time building a case to take everything I have. I looked at him. Really, looked at him. What I don't understand, and what I have been sitting with for 2 weeks, is the recording from Tuesday night. What Renee said, and what you said nothing in response to. He looked at the floor. For the first time since I had known my adult son, he had nothing. I would like you and Renee to leave this house, I said. You have 30 days. The eviction notice is already filed with the county. It is legally binding, and my attorney will enforce it. His head came up. You're evicting your own son. You attempted to have me declared incompetent through a fraudulent medical evaluation. You conspired to seize control of my financial accounts and my home through forged authority documents. You recorded a conversation in which your wife described placing me in a facility where my death would be unremarkable. My voice didn't shake. I'm not evicting my son. I'm removing people who committed crimes against me from my property. Renee appeared in the doorway behind him. She had been listening. Her face was white and composed in the way of someone who has already done their accounting and doesn't like the numbers. The will has been revised, I told them both. Filed with the county on the same day I met with Glenn. The house is designated to the Dallas Lawyers Care Foundation. You will each receive $40,000 upon my death. That decision was made before I had the full picture. If I filed the revision today, the number would be 0. Renee's composure cracked along one precise line. You planned all of this. You planned all of this. I responded to it. We had debts. You have debts. My assets are not your solution. Daniel moved then, stepping forward, and for a moment I thought he would do something physical. But he stopped and just stood there, his hands at his sides, looking like what he was, a man who had gambled on the wrong thing and lost every chip. Where are we supposed to go? His voice was quiet. We have nothing. That is a problem you created through your choices. You will solve it through your choices. They left my study. I heard them moving through the house, drawers opening, voices, the particular sounds of a life being dismantled. I returned to my journal and read the same paragraph 3 times before it settled. Dr. Calder's professional troubles began 2 days later. The complaint I had filed with the Texas Medical Board, supplemented by Glenn's documentation and the recording, initiated a formal review. His license was suspended pending investigation within the week. By the time the board completed their review a month later, they had found 3 prior cases with similar patterns. The suspension became permanent revocation. He would not practice medicine again in Texas or any state that shared licensing records, which was all of them. The county dismissed the competency petition on the same day the criminal complaint was filed. Attempted fraud, forgery of legal documents, conspiracy, both of their names on the filing. The DA's office moved with an efficiency that told me they had seen this pattern before and had no patience for it. Renee retained a private attorney. Daniel could not afford one, which told me that the debt situation was even worse than Sandra's report had indicated. The public defender assigned to him was young and earnest and visibly uncomfortable when she reviewed what her client had actually done. On July 5th, exactly 30 days after service, I drove to Glenn's office for the morning and left the key exchange to his assistant. They took their things and left my house keys on the kitchen table. No note. When I came home that afternoon, the guest wing was empty. The closet doors hung open. The bathroom counter was cleared. I stood in the doorway of that room for a long moment. Margaret and I had set it up as a guest room 20 years ago. Cream walls, a reading chair by the window, small prints she had chosen at a gallery in Santa Fe. Renee had replaced the prints with something modern and cold, the kind of art that fills space without contributing anything to it. I took those down first. Painters came 2 days later. The criminal proceedings moved through the fall. Daniel pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud and 1 count of forgery. Renee, who had organized most of the scheme, pleaded to the same charges after her attorney negotiated a plea. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her late 60s, who looked at the two of them with the particular exhaustion of someone who has seen this species of greed many times, sentenced each of them to 14 months in county lockup, with 5 years probation to follow, plus full restitution and fines. There was no mercy speech, no extended reflection on family. She simply read the sentence, noted that the victim was a retired attorney who had dedicated his career to the same legal system they had attempted to exploit, and closed the file. I did not attend the sentencing. Glenn gave me a call that afternoon. Daniel called me once, 2 months after he was released and placed on probation. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. He said he was working a warehouse job in Fort Worth. and that he was in counseling, and that he wanted me to know he was sorry, not for getting caught, but for what he had been willing to do. I listened. I believed he meant it, at least in the particular way people mean things when consequences have stripped everything else away. I told him I heard him, and that I hoped he would continue to mean it. I didn't tell him I would forgive him. That word carries a weight I wasn't prepared to lift. What I told him was that I would not be his enemy, and that he would have to build whatever came next himself without using me as foundation. He said he understood. The line was quiet for a moment before we both said goodbye. Sandra Birch sent me a short note after the sentencing, professional and warm in equal measure. Frank Holloway and I had lunch at a steakhouse on Greenville Avenue in October, and he let me pay without arguing, which is how I knew he understood that it wasn't about the food. In November, a woman named Carol Strickland called me from the Dallas Lawyers Care Foundation. She wanted to confirm my estate designation and to tell me about the clinic they had opened in East Dallas. Pro bono legal services for seniors facing financial exploitation by family members. More common than most people realize, she said. I told her I was not surprised. I made a separate donation that afternoon, in addition to the estate designation, because waiting to be dead to do good always struck me as leaving too much to chance. That evening I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon and watched the last of the November light go out of the sky over Dallas. The city spread wide and amber and indifferent in the distance, busy with 10,000 lives that had no knowledge of mine. The roses Margaret had planted along the front walk had gone dormant for winter. I had cut them back in October the way she always did, and they would come back in spring the way they always did. That is the contract with perennial things. I had spent 31 years in a system built on the idea that evidence, properly gathered and properly presented, produces outcomes that approximate justice. I had seen it fail. I had seen it twisted and delayed and compromised by money and politics and human weakness in 100 variations. But I had also seen it work. I had seen it work more often than people outside it believe. And I had never stopped believing that the difference between the two outcomes was usually preparation. They thought I was confused because I was old. They thought I was safe because I was trusting. They thought I was an easy target because I loved my son. And love, in their calculation, was a vulnerability. They were wrong about what love actually is when it is paired with clarity. It does not make you weak. It makes you willing to do hard things carefully, without pleasure, because the alternative is to be complicit in your own undoing. My glass was empty. I went inside and locked the new door with the new key and walked through the house that was mine again in every sense that word is supposed to carry. The rooms were quiet and warm and arranged exactly as I wanted them. There was no performance left to give. I went to bed and slept without listening for footsteps. Before you leave, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it honestly. Do you believe what I did was justice? Or was it a father using the law as a weapon against his own son because forgiveness felt like surrender? I have asked myself that question more times than I can count. I don't have a clean answer. What I have is this. He made choices that endangered my life, my home, and everything I had spent a lifetime building. I made choices that held him accountable for those choices without destroying what I had built to do it. Whether that is justice or just a very precise form of grief, I leave that to you. Tell me what you think in the comments. I read them all.